Hi, welcome back to the Sustainable Development Goals podcast with Maddie and Elizabeth. So today we are focusing on sustainability. That's what our episode is about. So the goals that we're going to be covering in this episode are affordable and clean energy, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, and responsible consumption and production. Okay, so let's begin. So the first goal is affordable and clean energy. And so the main focus of that is ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So first off, 733 million people are without electricity in 2020. So that's electricity of like any kind. And then 2.4 billion people still use inefficient and polluting like heating systems, such as any way of like burning coal, burning wood is sort of like polluting and like not great. So how are we gonna help this? One, we definitely need massive financial motivation towards like renewable resources, renewable energy, such as like scientific grants, funds for like generators and building like renewable energy resources, etc. However, I think we're on the right track. Recently, there was a breakthrough in fusion technology that people might have heard about, which is like super important, super helpful, and it could really be a future of technology for us. So one way would be like more scientific grants to sort of like figure out how can we do this like widespread, like how can we mass produce like the energy of the sun, which sounds a little bit silly right now, but it's also something we could do, and we just need to work for it, and our governments just need to like lobbying your governments to just make sure that they focus on that and that they do that.
And also like on a PR standpoint, making sure that like people understand the difference between fusion and fission, because there is definitely a fear, especially in older generations,
and that can go
nuclear.
Yeah, that can also go back to education people on like here are different like scientific ways that like we can like help create energy and it's very sustainable.
Yeah, it's great.
And then the second one is to work with least developed countries to make sure that they have electricity for their people. You know, like higher income countries should help devote more resources, more money towards LDCs in order to build like ways of producing electricity, preferably and obviously in a sustainable way, such as like hydroelectric power, wind power, solar power, or maybe fusion power in the next like couple decades. And we just also need like more globally, like more renewable energy and less like polluting sources, sort of like holding companies accountable, like don't use like natural gas or like fossil fuels or all of that. Okay, our next goal is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So the main goal of this is to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. So 1 in 3 manufacturing jobs are negatively affected by the COVID-19 crisis or by the Ukraine crisis. And also small-scale industries lack access to financial support for recovery from COVID-19. But then we also just need to, in order to help this, we need to lobby for more support towards low-tech manufacturing jobs, because this can be like, by low-tech, they mean like textile, like factory manufacturing jobs, and like small manufacturing firms just like give them more support so they can catch up behind these like big firms. And that could also make like the world more sustainable in general, is that like devoting more time to these smaller firms that are not going to use as much like fossil fuels and are also more likely to convert towards like sustainable energy. Give more manufacturing support in general to least developed countries, just like sort of creating more jobs in the manufacturing industry to train and educate like uneducated workers, which can lead to higher efficiency and productivity in the manufacturing industry, and just like generally making sure people are back on track, but they're doing it in a sustainable way. Our third goal is sustainable cities and communities. So the main focus of this is make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So about 1 billion people live in like slums today, and then along with this, only about 55% of municipal waste is managed, but not even like all municipal waste is like collected. I think it's something like 80% of municipal waste is collected, and the rest is just sort of like left to fester. And then 99% of the world's urban population breathes in polluted air, which is like, seeing that's an insane number. Like, that's literally almost 100% of the world's urban population, which is quite a bit.
No, because we do.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, we live in an urban area, and we breathe in polluted air, for sure. Like,
the amount of cars.
Yeah. So, how to help? Obviously, focus on making current or new cities more sustainable, using clean energy, more public transportation, like, less overcrowding. In general, just making sure people are, like, breathing in clean air. We obviously want to help the people that, like, everywhere, especially those that live in cities. Also diverting funds to build sustainable homes for people who currently live in slums.
Mm-hmm.
You know, making sure, like, everybody should have a place to live. That's just, like, and a place to live that's, like, affordable and, like, you're not, like, suffering from living in it. You know, like, that's just, like, a basic human right, you know?
Yeah.
We also need to build better infrastructure for waste management and city management so that growing cities, which cities are definitely growing, will be more sustainable in general. We want to go into the future with sustainable cities. We don't want to just, like, keep increasing, like, waste output and, like, just, like, carbon output, and, like, we want to make sure that our future generations will be, like, having happy, healthy lives. Okay, so our third goal of this episode is responsible consumption and production, or our fourth goal. So the main focus of this is to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. So the root cause of this is sort of the root cause of, like, loss of biodiversity and climate change. It comes from unsustainable production and consumption practices, and basically what that means is, like, whether you're producing goods and you're producing them in an unsustainable way, such as using fossil fuels, or if you're consuming goods in an unsustainable way, such as, like, wasting food, not recycling, you know, like,
littering.
Yeah, littering. And going on with, like, unsustainable consumption practices, about 30.3% of the world's food is wasted in some way or another. And we're going to talk about this more in the next episode, but we are in a hunger crisis right now, and that's almost a third of the world's food is just being, like, wasted, and if we didn't waste that food, that could be used to solve, like, the hunger crisis. We also just have an over-reliance on unsustainable natural resources. So this could be, like, obviously, first thing that comes to mind, natural gas, or, like, oil, or something like that. That's unsustainable, and it's a natural resource. We're gonna run out. But also just, like, resources that are going to run out, we need to focus on things that are renewable, things that are sustainable, such as wind, solar power, hydroelectricity, you know? So how to help? On a consumer level, there's a lot of, like, small things that you can do, and they'll just, like, help. Recycling, don't waste food, like, eat your leftovers, or only take as much as you can eat. Like, if you're at a restaurant and they give you too much food, take that home and eat it later. You know, don't waste the food. Make sure to properly dispose of all your waste. That can include recycling. That could also be, like, compost, or, like making sure you're not, like, throwing out, like, batteries, for instance.
Yeah, don't throw out batteries. There's, like, helpful things online with, like, things you can throw out and places you can dispose of, like, more chemical substances.
Yeah, and along with that, we can also, like, force or lobby the government to create, like, programs to make it easier for consumers to dispose of, like, hard to dispose of trash, such as, like, lithium-ion batteries. You can also do that on a consumer level. So, like, for instance, in the county that we live in, we're not allowed to, like, put glass in the recycling. You either have to take it to a special glass, like, disposing center, or you have to throw it out. However, throwing it out is obviously just, like, glass is easily recyclable. You, like, shouldn't throw it out. But my neighbor decided to sort of make it very easy for people to recycle their glass. He has it where he goes around our neighborhood, and then if you pay him to come, he'll come and pick up your glass, like, once every 2 weeks and take it to the recycling level. center, and he's made this like a whole thing, and that's something he did that can like sort of like helps like make that more responsible consumption practices, is that you are taking care of your waste, or you're getting someone to take care of your waste. And then on the production level, we need to hold large companies accountable for using non-renewable resources, and also just like practicing like non-renewable like practices. So for example, Shein, which is like a large like fast fashion like clothing company, like disposes of almost like, I don't know the exact number, but it's like a massive amount of their clothing that they create, they like just dispose of, which is obviously creating like a ton of waste. And then they also have like, on a whole separate issue, you have a ton of like human rights violations practices when it comes to paying their workers and like keeping their workers in like good conditions. Yeah. Yeah, we can also have government taxes on fossil fuels, such as a carbon tax.
That would incentivize the corporations to actually do something.
Yeah, exactly. And then our questions to consider for this episode are:
how did these sustainability goals relate back to our episode on climate goals?
Yeah, so we talked about this a bit, is that like a lot of stuff that comes with sustainability is making sure you're using sustainable resources and renewable resources, and that definitely relates back to climate, is that a lot of the reasons that we are facing climate change right now and the loss of biodiversity, a loss of habitats, is because we're using non-renewable resources. So by taking on more sustainable practices, we can help the environment, which is always a good thing.
How should we fund more sustainable infrastructure / energy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like on a consumer level, obviously like creating sort of funds and like donating to more sustainable infrastructure and energy. And I think governments should also sort of like put more like time and like thought and like prioritize making sure we have sustainable energy, because it might not seem it, well, one, it is a crisis right now, like this is a crisis, but certain people in charge might not think of it as a crisis, but it's like, this is a crisis. We need to put like actual time and effort and like money into these like sustainability goals, so that like we have a planet to live on in like 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Like, this is our only planet.
Yeah,
like this is the one we got, so keeping it like in good condition and like taking care of like what we have is very important.
Okay.
Is it possible to become 100% sustainable?
I would say definitely yes. Like with the right motivation and like with the right resources and like innovations, which can also go back to like increasing scientific innovation and sort of like finding sustainable ways to do everything, like we can definitely become like 100% sustainable. Like it's not like a dream or something like that. This is definitely possible, and we just need to like put our minds to it and do it.
I think it's like a lot of it is due to corporations, so like providing incentives for corporations to have sustainable practices and push sustainable practices, because right now it benefits them to not do those things because it's cheaper to use natural gas, coal, like all of those things. It is cheaper. So if we incentivize using like solar power or wind power, or in time nuclear fusion, things like that, where it is more sustainable practice, and that will, I think, have the largest effect, is that incentivization.
Okay, and then finally,
relating back to the 17th goal, how can countries help each other to bring about more sustainable infrastructure?
So first thing, which is a theme we touched on in this episode and our previous episode, highly developed countries should help low developed countries with like bringing about more sustainable infrastructure. But like Elizabeth was saying, like in the last episode, we don't want to like just like force ourselves
into their like because we also have a lot of things we need to solve, and it's not on us to change entire practices, it's just to help.
Like a guiding hand. But
because we have the funds to help.
Also just like holding other countries accountable, saying like, hey, that's bad, you know, like, or obviously doing more than that, but like saying like looking at another country's practices and like on a global scale being like, hey, we shouldn't do that, don't do that, you know, like these are all the scientific reasons why you should not do that. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Yeah,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.